welcome to another episode of Community Connections. I am your host, Anna Orr, and today we are talking a new update in the autism acceptance community. Today we are talking to MAAN and Fatima. They are staffers with the Multicultural Autism Action Network. And we are talking about something that is going to help all of the scholars in your network navigate this upcoming school year with a little bit better ease. Stay tuned, this is going to be a good episode and one that you'll probably want to share with someone in your network.
Manguddummaan qormaata ta'uu danda'a. Waa'een manguddoomoo haadha keessanii isin yaaddessee beekaa? Waa'een abbaa, abbeeraa, eessuma, adaadaa, akkoo, akaakayyuu fi abaabayyuu keessanii hoo yaada isinitti ta'ee jira? Dhimma manguddummaa fi manguddootaan wal qabatu irratti gaafii kamuu qabaannaan dhaabbanni Senior Linkage Line isin gargaaruudhaaf qophiidha. Dhaabbanni Senior Linkage Line dhaabbata State Minnesota guutuu keessatti dhimma manguddummaa irratti tajaajila kennu yoo ta'u, dhaabbilee tola ooltummaa kanneen akka tireelisii fi ejentiiwwan biroo wajjin ta'uudhaan manguddootaaf tajaajila garaagaraa kennuudhaan beekama. Dhaabbata keenya biratti manguddoonni kamuu tajaajila geejjibaa, tajaajila mana jireenyaa fi inshuraansii fayyaa argachuuf hin rakkatan. Gargaarsi dhaabbanni keenya manguddootaaf godhu kana qofaa miti. Nyaata manatti namaaf dhiyeeffamuu fi oolmaa manguddootaa ilaalchisee odeeffannoo barbaachisu manguddootaaf barbaaduun gargaara. Gargaarsi dhaabbanni keenya manguddootaaf taasisu manguddoota biras dabree maatii manguddootaatiif boqonnaa sammuu kenna. Odeeffannoo dabalataatiif 8-333-243 irratti bilbiluu hin dagatinaa.
Dhaabbata Senior Linkage anas na gargaaree jira, isinis koottaa itti fayyadama.
Thank you for joining me, MAAN and Fatima, here on behalf of the Multicultural Autism Action Network. Can you guys talk to me about the work that you do here within the state of Minnesota?
Sure, I can start us off a little bit.
Please.
So the Multicultural Autism Action Network is a nonprofit organization that was started by parents of children with disabilities in multicultural communities. My colleague Fatima was one of the founders of that organization. And it really came about because parents saw how incredibly difficult it can be to navigate getting services and supports for children with disabilities, even under the very best of circumstances. And then when you add in differences in things like language and culture and communication styles and preferences for oral communication over written, those things can feel really insurmountable.
Can you talk to me a little bit about what that work necessarily entails? I know that it is focused around disabilities, but what is the day-to-day like for you guys?
Coming from multicultural, families like our Somali or Oromo communities, we have a language barrier. Our families are dealing with, new diagnosis, the stigma in the community, not understanding the culture in the system itself. It requires not only speaking English, but you have to understand the how it works, how the system works. So getting services for that child, from diagnosis to making the parent understand their rights to getting navigating through the system as far as county services or day treatment or what school to send your kid to or what speech evaluation and OT and all of that is basically what we do on daily basis.
Now, I know that, MAAN, you are no stranger to the show. You were here a couple months ago talking about the amazing work you guys do with the autism community. Can you talk to me specifically about the new initiative that was just launched with MAAN?
Absolutely. So we're very excited about a new program that we've just launched. We've created a series of 6 videos for parents of children with disabilities that talk about the IEP process in school. And IEP stands for Individualized Education Program. And it's basically the law that governs how services are provided to kids with disabilities in schools. And the reason we did this is because that process is not very accessible to families. It uses a lot of terminology and jargon, and it's very paperwork intensive. So what we did is we kind of tried to boil down 6 key concepts and explain them in plain language and in a video format that's very easily accessible. And then we created those videos in English and Somali and Oromo language to make sure that they're available to parents who need them.
Now, can you talk to me a little bit more in depth about the 6 things that you guys broke down in these videos? I know the IEP is usually a traditional, recognizable term that you see, even if you don't know exactly what it is. You're like, I've heard of this before, or maybe a relative or a child in your network has one. But can you talk about what the other ones were so that people may see them, but also may realize I need to use these in my own network?
Yeah, absolutely. So we focused on several key concepts, and one of them is simply, what is IDEA? What is the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act? And that's the name of the law that kind of governs all of these things. The second one is, what is an IEP? Again, that's the key document where all of this information is going to be recorded about what the goals are for your child, what the present levels are for your child, how are we going to measure what they need, where they're going to receive their services, and how many services. So we really kind of explained those components. We also made short videos about some of the acronyms that are used in the process. One is the concept of FAPE, or Free Appropriate Public Education, which is another kind of cornerstone idea of the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. Another one of the videos is about something called Prior Written Notice, or PWN, and that is a right that families have to receive notification if something's going to change for their child. And it's one of the most powerful tools that families have in their toolkit when advocating for services for their children, but many families don't really know what it is, or what it means, or how to use it. Another concept that we made a video about is something called LRE, or Least Restrictive Environment, and that explains the idea that all children with disabilities have a right to be educated along with their non-disabled peers to the greatest extent possible. And it's another sort of cornerstone foundational idea of the Individuals with Disabilities Act. And then the final video is about what to do when you disagree. What to do if you don't agree with what's in your child's IEP, or you have problems with the school, or if you're in conflict with them. And we lay out a number of different options that families have as to how to resolve those disputes with the schools.
Now, Fatima, you talked a little bit about the language barrier. Yeah. Can you talk to me about what led to this project even coming to fruition?
We, MAAN, this organization that we have been working, we realized that our families were calling us a lot for IEB meetings, not knowing when the deadline is for, when you have the prior written notice, like Maren mentioned. And then we said, what is going on? This is already passed. So the parents, we learned that our families, not only do they not understand when a paper is sent in a kid's backpack, you can only imagine if mom is busy with her other children and doesn't understand or read the language, that's the least of my problem, right? So these families will call us when the prior written notice, which is 14 days from the date that you received that IEP, is already passed, which means the services that the child is going to get, it's automatic. Even if you disagree, nothing you can do about it. There are some rules, they're exceptional to that IEP. So we were trying to, make the families understand. We have done tons of education classes, training sessions. And every time there's IEP, we're getting the phone calls, the same thing. So we came up with this idea, how if we make small videos, basic, like what to do if you get a letter in the mail or in your kid's backpack. What is IEP? That way our families can watch the video, 5-10 minutes, understand what their rights are, and go from there and call us if they need assistance. I am a parent of a child with special needs. My son has autism. Thanks to my colleague Maren, she educated me about this whole thing, IEP, idea. I had no idea, how important when we go over this. I'll call Maren, how do I, can you help me? And Maren is like going in details. And it's like the language is like 20 page. It's made for the parents not to understand. It's a complicated system. So we said we have to do something. If nobody has done it, then we have to do it.
Is this the first program of its kind?
I think there are many attempts to make information available to families in our multicultural communities, but none that have really focused on cultural accessibility. I think, there's a lot of good intentions around making things available to parents. So for example, Fatima referred to the 20-page document that you receive. A school district might translate it into Somali or translate it into Oromo, but they don't really ask the family, is that accessible to you? Is that a format that you can provide? Or you might sit in a meeting where you have an interpreter available, but if that person doesn't know the special education process, doesn't understand where that family is coming from about their child's disability, they're not really going to be able to build that bridge to get the family to a place where they can really advocate for their child. So yes, there have been, lots of attempts, but I think this one is really kind of unique in that it's being led by the families that it's designed for.
Walk me through the process about how you guys came to create some of these videos.
I can start in on that one a little bit.
Yes.
So the idea came about, again, just from sitting in IEP meetings with families and hearing the same problems coming up over and over and over again, and thinking, we serve roughly 300 families a year, but there are tens of thousands of families in Minnesota that are families of children with disabilities in our multicultural communities. So our question was, how can we reach more? How can we expand the scope? And we have done these short videos in the past for other types of activities where we were just talking about, the stigma around disability, or trying to educate families a little bit on services that might be available. So we already kind of had that video tool in our toolkit. But the idea of doing something that's specifically focused on the IEP process, I think, really came from conversations among our team about what families needed and how could we present this information in a way that would really be accessible to them.
That makes a lot of sense. Did you guys partner with any other community orgs while you guys navigated this process?
Yeah, absolutely. We did the first draft of the scripts ourselves. With myself and Fatima and our colleague Rufo, really kind of as the key designers of the scripts in terms of what the content was going to be and what we were going to focus on. And then we also worked with a team of attorneys from the Southern Minnesota Regional Law Services. And we also had review by the Disability Law Center here in Minneapolis, and also by several state agencies. And the project was actually funded with a grant through the Minnesota Department of Health. So we recognize that our expertise is in outreach to families and community support, but we also needed a legal team to make sure that the information we were providing was accurate and correct and concise.
Now talk to me, Fatima, a little bit about why you guys chose the specific breakdowns that you did for the videos.
We chose it because these are the basic, when a kid has any special needs, they are starting school, these are the foundation of the IEP. So for the 6 topics, the videos that we did, it is what the IEP is about, like what to do, point A, B, C. We chose it because if a parent understands, okay, I have an IEP, I want to see where my kid's at, what is the assessment, what are the goals, what are services provided, how long are the services, what is he receiving, is he getting 20 minutes speech or 20 minutes on occupational therapy? So because it affects that child, and that's what the foundation of the IEP is, we thought this is very important information to get to our communities. And you know that multicultural communities, we're oral, so we share things on WhatsApp, on Facebook, on YouTube. Handwritten information barely gets to us. So if a friend sends you a video of an IEP or that speaks your language, they're more likely to listen and understand before I'm like, oh, I didn't know that. Parents don't know their rights. They are not empowered when they're in IEP meetings. Our job is to make sure that they're empowered, they're educated, and they understand their rights. I didn't know. When you go in a room where 20 people are sitting, you're the only parent. You're the only one there, and the person that's being talked about in the IEP is your child. Sometimes you feel powerless, and we're educating our parents. You are the most important person in that meeting, in that IEP. So that's why we chose those core videos.
I think that's very powerful. Marin, you talked a little bit about cultural accessibility. Can you explain what that term means to people that may be hearing it for the first time?
Yeah, that's something that we talk about a lot in our organization. And mainly because we see a lot of really good intentions, and I'm certainly guilty of this myself, making assumptions about what will be accessible to another person without actually asking them. We know that most of the information around IEPs and around special education is provided in written format, often in English, often online. And for many of the families we work with, that just really isn't accessible to them. They may have preferences for oral language instead of written, as Fatima mentioned. They may have preferences for, short snippets of information rather than sitting in a 3-hour, lecture or something like that. So I think it's really about asking people, what would make this accessible to you? How do you prefer to receive information? We see the same thing with interpreters too, where again, there may be very good intentions behind it, but if the interpreter speaks a different dialect than the person who's receiving the information, we're not going to make the connection that we need to make. And the reason we felt this is so important is that our system of providing services to kids with disabilities assumes that the parent is going to be the best advocate for their child. And they cannot do that if we're not providing the information in a way that's accessible. So that's why we feel like this is so important.
Now, last time you were here, we talked a little bit about the stigma culturally around autism and special needs children. Can you just talk a little bit more in depth about that conversation? And Fatima, you can join in too as well about your own experiences.
In our community, the multicultural community, whether it's the Somali or the Oromo community, disability for us is like it has to be physical. You have to see it. Somebody in a wheelchair, somebody who has invisible disability. It's hardly we don't even think when we see these children running around on the playgrounds. Sometimes parents feel like, I can't go to the playground because they're going to think that my kid is, what's wrong with your kid? Why don't you discipline him? Keep him home. Most of the time, because there isn't a lot of acceptance, parents cannot express their feelings and their frustrations because of the backlash in our community. Not necessarily meaning to be mean, it's just the way it's been there for years. Instead of calling you by the name, oh, the girl with the sick kid, he has differences in his brain. He has, it's just like somebody who has diabetes. Would you call the diabetes lady in apartment 304? No, you call her by her name. It's just that I feel like our community has come a long ways. We have been doing a lot of education. A lot of people have been doing awareness, acceptance, and understanding, but we still have a lot of ways to go because I have seen parents that have multiple kids with disabilities that are not telling their family members, that are not sharing, or maybe one of them is diagnosed and the other two are not, because they just can't deal with the community. And people are asking, what did you do wrong? Why? Don't ask me why. I can't go take my kid to Eid celebration after Ramadan. I can't go to community gathering because I'm worried I'm going to be stared at, So the stigma, that's the stigma. And you as a parent who is dealing with this and a heavy burden of dealing with a kid who's got a high support needs, it's a lot. If everybody understands you and supports you and say, hey, what can I do for you? Can I watch your kid for 20 minutes? Do you want to go out for a walk? Can I buy you grocery? Do you need help? I know you might not have a daycare or somebody at home. If we all do it together, I think we can destigmatize and normalize it because every person deserves the opportunity. Every child needs to be treated equally. Doesn't matter what they have, what disability they have. Because we all want to be at the table and be treated with respect and humility.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I think if I could just add on to what Fatima put so beautifully too, I think so often when we see something we don't understand or that maybe we don't recognize, our reaction might be fear. There's a difference, that's something to be afraid of, that's something to push away. And we all do that. I think that's maybe a human nature. Yeah. But I think the message that we want to spread is, if your first reaction is judgment, just hit the pause on that and maybe, greet that family or that child with curiosity and compassion and kindness. And that's really the message that we want to get out, that we want to see for our own children.
How would you say that this effort supports the work you guys have done with the videos?
Do you want to take that one?
ahead. You could go
I
ahead. It's
can
fine.
jump in on that. I think, what Fatima was saying about families sort of wrestling with stigma around disability ties very closely to what I was mentioning earlier about the assumptions we make about families being in a position to be the child's greatest advocate. And that is really, really hard to do if the parent is not a place where they can accept the child's diagnosis themselves. If I as a parent am still wrestling with my own feelings about my child's autism diagnosis, it's really hard for me to advocate for him or to be in a place where I will push for more services or more rights or advocate for better support for him if I don't accept that myself. So I think these things really do go hand in hand. It's about education, it's about empowerment, it's about helping families understand that they're not alone in this journey. And for those of us who, have been on this path for a while, we want to share what we've learned. There's things that I certainly learned from other families of autistic children that benefited me greatly. There's certainly things that I learned from autistic adults that really changed how I parented my child. So we feel like the more we can share information and connect families with each other, the better off we'll all be.
I think that's beautifully summed up. Can you share with me one final hope that you have outside of what you just beautifully did, Marin, about this work, Fatima, that you want parents to feel?
I want every parent to feel empowered and educated and feel like they are the greatest advocate for their children, and that this project educates our community and lets them know you have the right for appropriate and competent interpreter. If there's no interpreter, you don't have to take the IEP meeting, and know that you are the best advocate for your child. And if you need help, there's always parents like support groups that are out there that have been through the path. I have been through it, but you know what? I had other parents that held my hand and supported me when I was struggling, when I didn't want to make another move or make a phone call or make an appointment. So we're hoping that know that the struggle is real, but there's a hope, and you're your child's best advocate. And we hope that this information that we're sharing today, empowers you, because we are parents. We've been there. So fear less, and we hope that we can all come together and, treat everybody with respect and equally.
Thank you both for joining me today, and
Thank
thank you
you.
for the work that you guys are doing across the greater metro area, statewide, and hopefully beyond soon enough.
Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much, Anna, for
Unfortunately, that is all the time that we have for today's episode. Hopefully something was said or done that you found educational and or inspirational. A special thank you to Marin and Fatima for their work with MAAN, and I hope that you found yourself with a piece of information that will be valuable for you and someone you love in the very near future. As always, I am your host, Anna Orr, and I look forward to connecting again with you soon.